5 years have passed since I left my family, but today, my heavy heart and quickened breath brought me back to my brother's graduation. While he smiled, surrounded by everyone, I hid behind the crowd, the truth pulsating in my veins. No one knew that I was the one responsible for the betrayal that shattered them, the reason for the separation that consumed us all. When his name echoed through the auditorium, my body trembled. It was time to reveal who I really was. My name is Luna, and I am the reason our family has never been the same. My heart raced as I watched Raphael walk up to the stage, his eyes shining with pride and excitement. He didn't know I was there, watching the scene unfold with a mix of joy and pain. The graduation was a moment of celebration, but for me, it was a reflection of everything I had lost. My mother, Fernanda's smile, lit up her face, and I wondered if she still remembered the girl who once dreamed of the same graduation, filled with hopes and promises. My heart raced as I watched Raphael walk up to the stage, his eyes shining with pride and excitement. He didn't know I was there, watching the scene unfold with a mix of joy and pain. The graduation was a moment of celebration, but for me, it was a reflection of everything I had lost. My mother, Fernanda's smile lit up her face, and I wondered if she still remembered the girl who once dreamed of the same graduation, filled with hopes and promises. Carlos, my father, stood by her side, his gaze fixed on his son, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I realized I was no longer part of that family picture. The background music filled the room, but in my mind, the sound of muffled memories echoed, creating a symphony of conflicting emotions. Camila had encouraged me to come, saying that the past shouldn't stop me from celebrating Raphael's achievements. Yet her presence beside me didn't make the pain disappear. She was aware of my story and chose to stay with me anyway. That unwavering friendship had always been a safe harbor amid the emotional storms I faced, but now the guilt of being there intensified with every passing moment. When Raphael's name was announced, a roar of applause filled the auditorium. I involuntarily rose, but the fear of being recognized made me hesitate. What would I say to them? How could I face the family I left behind, unsure if there was still a place for me in their lives? Raphael looked out into the audience, searching for a familiar face. For a moment, my heart raced, and I thought about waving, about revealing myself. However, the weight of the past held me back, like an anchor preventing me from floating. In that instant, Raphael began his speech. He talked about challenges and triumphs, about how each of us carries a story that shapes who we are. His words resonated within me, and I couldn't help the tears that streamed down my face. I wanted to be the sister he imagined, the one who had always been by his side, but the truth was that I had distanced myself. The memories of the arguments and accusations that led to my departure were still fresh in my mind, and every word spoken by Raphael felt like a reminder of what I could never have again. The speech ended with a burst of applause, and I realized that the moment to leave was drawing near. Camila, noticing my emotional state, tried to comfort me, but there was a desperation she couldn't understand. I felt like a ghost, invisible amid a celebration that should have been mine too. As the ceremony concluded, people began to rise, and I knew it was now or never. With an act of courage, I took a deep breath and walked toward the exit. But as I passed Fernanda and Carlos, they turned, and I could see the look of surprise on their faces. There's been a misunderstanding, I thought, but I knew it was more than that. What I had caused in their lives couldn't be easily undone. My mother's gaze, mixed with confusion and pain, paralyzed me. Carlos, who had always been the pillar of our family, seemed fragile in the face of the revelation. I couldn't comprehend how they could still care, how they could still hope for me. The thought of facing their disapproval terrified me, but the instinct to reconnect with my family was stronger. Luna? Raphael's voice broke the silence. He recognized me, and the expression on his face shifted between relief and disbelief. At that moment, I felt the full weight of my choices and their consequences. My brother had always been the light in the darkness surrounding us, and now, at such a significant moment in his life, I was there, disturbing what could have been a perfect day. His face lit up, but soon it was clouded with concern. "What are you doing here?" The words wouldn't come out. I wanted to explain, but the story was long and full of nuances that no one was prepared to hear. Camilla stepped closer, as if wanting to support me, but the atmosphere was thick, and I sensed that the entire family was on the verge of breaking apart once more. "I came to congratulate you," I finally managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. Raphael's gaze seemed to search for answers, but he didn't know that the truth could be as devastating as the betrayal I had caused. "You shouldn't have come," Carlos said, his voice sounding like a judgment. I could see he was trying to mask the pain, but his eyes told me everything. What I had done was still an open wound in the family, and now, standing there before them, I had no idea how to heal it. Fernanda approached, tears in her eyes reflecting confusion and sadness, and all I wanted was to hug her, but that gesture would seem like an insult to the pain I had caused. "We need to talk, Luna," Fernanda said, her voice trembling. The crowd around us seemed to fade away, and I knew that this moment would determine the future of our family. I didn't know what to say, but I knew that the path to reconciliation began here. It was time to face the ghosts and, perhaps, find a way back home. Fernanda looked into my eyes, as if trying to decipher a puzzle she had created herself. "You know we've always loved you, right?" The question hung in the air, laden with hope and doubt. I wanted to believe that love still existed, but the years I spent away had left deep scars. I couldn't simply ignore the wounds that still throbbed within me, and the prospect of forgiveness seemed almost unattainable. Love isn't enough when trust is shattered, I thought, as a wave of conflicting feelings washed over me. However, I realized that Raphael's graduation was a starting point. He was there, radiant in his cap and gown, unaware that the presence of the sister who had distanced herself could change everything around him. I remembered the nights he dreamed big, planning his future and sharing his hopes with me. Guilt washed over me like a tide, and I wondered if he still missed me. What I didn't know was that Raphael had also carried the pain of our separation, a pain that manifested silently, unnoticed by me. "Come on, let's go somewhere quieter," Camila suggested, gently pulling me away from the chaos of the celebration. I felt a wave of gratitude for having someone like her by my side, someone who understood the weight of unspoken words and difficult decisions. As we walked, the atmosphere became calmer, and I could hear my own thoughts more clearly. Camilla stopped in a more secluded corner and looked at me. "You don't have to do this alone, Luna. I'm here to support you." I took a deep breath, trying to find courage. "What if I don't know how to reconnect with them?" I confessed, vulnerability seeping into my voice. Camilla's expression was the same as always, understanding but firm. "You're stronger than you think. Sometimes the first step is the hardest, but you have to take that step if you want to move forward." Her words were like a beacon amid the fog of my fear. I decided I needed to face my parents before the ceremony began. Hearing the upbeat music in the background, my mind began to wander. The home I left behind, the family dinners that never happened, the advice I didn't receive. The list was long and filled with regrets. Each of them formed a barricade between me and what we once called home. Looking at Camilla, who stood by my side, I realized that the strength I sought also came from our friendship. If I had her support, maybe I could cross that invisible barrier. We returned to the center of the celebration, where Carlos was now animatedly chatting with Raphael's friends. Seeing him laughing and surrounded by other parents tightened my heart. I knew his joy was genuine, but it didn't lessen the pain I felt from being distant for so long. When our eyes met, he hesitated for a moment, as if recognizing someone he hadn't seen in years. I decided it was time to act. The need to reconnect was stronger than the fear that paralyzed me. I walked up to him, my heart racing. Carlos noticed my presence, and his smile faltered for an instant, but he quickly composed himself. "Luna, it's great to see you." The enthusiasm in his voice surprised me, and I wondered if he was truly happy to see me or just trying to maintain appearances. "Dad," I said, the word coming out more like a whisper. "We need to talk." He nodded, his expression shifting to a seriousness that made me fear what would come next. Carlos guided me to a quieter corner, away from the people laughing and taking photos. With each step, part of me wanted to run, but another part knew there was no turning back. "What's going on, Luna?" His voice was calm, but there was a tremor that didn't go unnoticed by me. I feel like we need to talk about all of this," I began, nodding toward the ongoing celebration. "About what happened between us, what I did, the way I left." The silence that followed was heavy, and I could see the emotions dancing in my father's eyes. "You don't need to apologize," he finally said, but I knew it was more than that. "But I want to understand how you were feeling." I felt a knot begin to unravel inside me. It was the first time in a long time that someone was genuinely willing to listen to me, and it gave me courage. I felt lost and didn't know how to deal with the pressure, with the expectations. I ran away, and instead of facing my problems, I hid. The sincerity in my words seemed to dissipate some of the tension that hung between us. Carlos took a deep breath, seeming to consider each word. "You're not alone, Luna. You never were," he affirmed, his words warm, like a shelter I didn't know I needed. In that moment, I realized there was a path toward reconciliation, a path that would require vulnerability and courage from both sides. "I want to work on this, Dad," I confessed, finally allowing hope to begin to sprout within me. "I want us to be a family again." He smiled, a smile that lit up his face and gave me a spark of hope. "That's all I've ever wanted," he said, the sincerity in his voice warming my heart. The weight of guilt began to lift, and amid the celebration of the graduation, a new story was beginning to be written between us. If you identified with this journey of reconciliation and self-discovery, preserve to subscribe for more stories like this. Your presence is essential. The warmth of the celebration enveloped everyone, and I watched Rafael surrounded by friends, laughing and celebrating his victory. This was his night, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being an intruder, even after the comforting words we exchanged. The loud music filled the space, but the noise felt distant, as if I were in a bubble, isolated from conflicting emotions. The table full of food and drink was right there, but what nourished me was the hope that, perhaps, starting that night, I could rebuild a bond with my family. Camila appeared by my side, her gaze lit with the joy of the moment. "Luna, you need to enjoy this. It's a special occasion," she said, pulling me to dance. I hesitated for a second, but then realized this was the perfect opportunity to step away from my heavy thoughts and, for a moment, forget the wounds of the past. We danced together, and the feeling of freedom and lightness began to emerge. I smiled, and the heat that had once suffocated me slowly transformed into a sense of belonging. As I danced, I saw Fernanda, my mother, animatedly chatting with other mothers. She looked beautiful that night, wearing a dress that, years ago, I remarked she should wear more often. A small impulse made me want to approach her, but the memory of the arguments and the heavy silences between us made me hesitate. Then, between one song and another, our eyes met. A silent moment formed between us, where the world around us seemed to fade away. However, the expression on her face was a mix of pride and sadness, and I knew there was much we still needed to resolve. Later, when I grabbed a glass of water in a corner of the party, I saw Carlos chatting with Rafael. His gaze was filled with admiration, and I noticed how the relationship between them seemed strong, unshakable. A pang of jealousy arose within me. I didn't want to be the distant sister, the one who drifted away and left the family in a state of disconnection. I took a deep breath and approached, trying not to appear tense. "Hi, Dad. Raphael, I'm so proud of you." The words came out sincerely, and to my surprise, Carlos smiled, a smile that seemed to bring relief and warmth. "Thank you, Luna. You have no idea how much your presence here means," Raphael said. And I realized that the absence of so long hadn't erased the joy that existed in our relationship. I wondered if, at least, a bit of that connection was still intact. As the celebration continued, speeches began. Each of Raphael's teachers and peers praised his effort and dedication. And as I listened to the stories, I realized that my brother wasn't just a family achievement, but a young man who had faced his own battles and overcome obstacles. The pride I felt in him grew with every word. However, there was a shadow looming over my happiness. The shadow of secrets that couldn't be ignored forever. When the event finally ended and people began to disperse, I found myself alone in a corner, observing others. Camila had stepped away to help Raphael say goodbye to his friends, and I wondered if I should do the same. Before I could make a decision, my mother approached. "Luna, can we talk for a minute?" Her voice was soft but carried a weight I wasn't ready to bear. We moved to a more private area, away from the music and laughter. What I didn't expect was the sad and worried look Fernanda brought, as if carrying a truth she had never had the courage to share with me. "I know things haven't been easy, and I'm so sorry, my daughter," she began, her words heavy with emotion. "You and your father distanced yourselves from me," I replied, frustration escaping with sincerity. "Why didn't you try to understand me? I just wanted to feel part of the family again." The pain was laid bare, and I could see the confusion in her eyes. She hesitated. Time seemed to stretch as the tension between us grew. "Luna, there are things your father and I never talked about, things that happened before you decided to leave," she said, and the mention of old secrets made my heart race. It wasn't easy for us, and I didn't want you to carry the weight of our history. I felt I was on the verge of discovering something that could change everything, but the thought of facing more painful truths intimidated me. "You need to tell me, Mom. We need to solve this together," I insisted, my voice firm. "We can't continue like this. If we're a family, we need to be honest, no matter how difficult it is." She nodded, a mix of relief and fear in her eyes. That conversation could be a turning point. I felt that, finally, we were about to break the barriers that separated us. The air was charged with electricity, as if the truth was about to burst forth. "Luna," Fernanda began, "your father and I went through a very tough time. Life has not been kind to us, and I didn't know how to handle it. I closed myself off, and what was supposed to be a warm home became a space of tension and silence. You weren't alone in that pain, but I couldn't show you." The weight of her words hit me like a wave. What once seemed to be merely a lack of understanding now revealed a story of struggle and vulnerability. "Mom, I just wanted you to tell me. I could have helped," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. I didn't want to be a stranger in my own home. The conversation flowed, and as words were exchanged, the space between us began to shrink. Fernanda shared her insecurities, her failures, and I, in turn, revealed how I felt lost and helpless. In the end, we were no longer just mother and daughter, but two women seeking to understand each other amid pain and love. I love you, Luna, and I want you to know that, despite everything, you've always been part of us. Let's try to rebuild this, little by little." The sincerity in her gaze warmed my heart. I knew the road would be long, but for the first time, I felt we were willing to walk it together. The party had ended, but for me, a new phase was beginning. The warmth of love and understanding was just starting to spread between us, and as the night closed, a new hope ignited in my heart. As the guests began to disperse, with smiles and hugs, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. Raphael was surrounded by friends, all laughing and celebrating, and I wondered if he had any idea how long I had waited for this moment. I felt a mix of pride and sadness, for there was still an invisible distance between us, a barrier I needed to confront. Camila, noticing my contemplation, gently pulled my hand and led me closer to the table where the sweets were arranged. The aroma of cakes and homemade treats brought back childhood memories. When Raphael and I would devour the goodies our mother made for birthday parties, the nostalgia was almost palpable. "Are you okay?" Camila asked, her gaze filled with concern. I smiled, a smile that didn't hide the confusion inside me. "Just thinking about how things have changed," I replied. "I guess we'll always have to deal with changes, won't we?" Her response was a thoughtful nod. We both knew that, despite the joy of that day, there was much more to unravel. The light atmosphere of the celebration began to cool as the whispers of other guests reached my ears. Some spoke of Raphael's achievements, while others mentioned, in hushed tones, my absence in recent years. It was as if, even amid the party, I was still a stranger. I decided it was time to approach Raphael, even though nervousness made me hesitate. He was among friends, laughing, but when his eyes met mine, the expression of joy turned into something deeper. I could see a mixture of surprise and happiness on his face. "Luna!" he exclaimed, stepping away from the group to hug me. The embrace was instant, as if we hadn't spent so many years apart. "You came! I didn't believe you would really come." His heart raced against mine, and I remembered all the moments when I wished I could be there for him. "I will always be by your side, Raphael," I replied, trying to convey all the love I felt for him. The sensation of being beside my brother brought me a new vigor, but also a wave of memories of how complicated everything had become. As the party continued, I stepped back a little, watching how his interaction with friends seemed so natural. My thoughts were soon interrupted by the presence of my father, Carlos, who joined us. His expression was a mix of joy and apprehension. "Luna, you look beautiful," he said, and I noticed a shadow of emotion in his voice. "Thank you, Dad," I replied, trying to hide the tension that was building between us. There was so much unsaid between us, and I knew the conversation I feared so much was about to happen. "I'm really sorry about my absence," I said, breaking the silence that had formed. Carlos looked down, the words seeming difficult to articulate. "You know you've always been in our hearts, right?" He averted his gaze, and I realized he too was grappling with memories he preferred to forget. "I distanced myself because I needed time to understand things," I tried to explain, but the sincerity in my voice felt distant. The silence dragged on, and a weight hung in the air. At that moment, Fernanda approached, her presence bringing a new tension. "We're all together, and that's what matters right now," she said, trying to lighten the mood. But I knew I couldn't just let things be like this. "Mom, you know we have a lot to discuss," I replied, looking into her eyes. Her heart seemed to tighten, and I wondered if she was ready to face the truth. "Yes, I know, but can we do this later, please?" "Today is a special day," Fernanda pleaded, her voice almost begging. The pain in my chest intensified, for I wanted to believe we could leave things behind, but I also knew that was impossible without confronting what had really happened. "I can't ignore everything that's happened," I said, trying to stay calm. The tension between us grew, and in the background, Raphael's friends celebrated. "He needs us now," Carlos interjected, trying to unify the family in a moment of happiness. I looked at Raphael, who was still surrounded by his friends, and I realized that the battle at home needed to be won before we could truly celebrate his victory. "I don't want him to feel this tension," I said, the desire to protect my brother overshadowing everything else. With a hesitant gesture, I decided I needed some time to step away and reflect. "I'm going for a walk outside," I announced, and Camila, sensing my need for a breather, followed me. As soon as we stepped into the cool night air, the contrast between the warmth of the party and the chilly breeze brought me clarity. "Are you okay, Luna?" Camila asked, looking at me with genuine concern.
I'm trying to be, I replied, knowing the struggle wouldn't end anytime soon. I gazed at the starry sky, searching for an answer among the constellations. The stars seemed to remind me that even amid chaos, there was always a way forward. We walked for a few minutes in comfortable silence until Camila broke the barrier. You know you can count on me, right? The sincerity in her voice warmed my heart. I know, Camila. It's just that sometimes it feels like I'm fighting against a sea of feelings. I miss who we were before, and at the same time, I'm afraid of what we might become. I believed she would understand the confusion consuming me. The smell of cut grass and flowers at night mixed with the aroma of sweets still floating in the air, creating a bittersweet sensation. It's normal to feel this way, she said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Changes are hard, but they can also bring new opportunities. You and Raphael can reconnect if that's what you both want. Her words resonated within me like a distant echo, a hope I hesitated to embrace. What if he doesn't want to hear me? What if he doesn't care about what I have to say? My insecurity escaped my lips as a whisper. You'll never know until you try, Camilla asserted, her gaze firm and confident. Remember, he misses you too. Life is full of surprises, and maybe today is the first step towards something new. As she spoke, a wave of courage began to grow within me. I knew I had to face the truth, not just for myself, but also for Raphael. Thank you, Camilla, I said, feeling her presence as a safe harbor amid the storm of emotions. Determined, I took a deep breath and returned to the party, my heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and hope. The bright lights and laughter seemed more alive now, as if the universe were conspiring in my favor. Upon re-entering, I spotted Raphael, who was now alone, gazing into the horizon. He looked lost in thought, and I wondered if, like me, he was also dealing with his own insecurities. With determination, I approached, aware that our conversation could be the beginning of something new. As I got closer to Raphael, he was still lost in his thoughts. I knew him well enough to sense that there was something more in his gaze, something that suggested that graduation wasn't just a celebration, but also a moment of reflection. Hey, Rafa, I said, trying to sound casual, but my heart was racing. He slowly turned his head and looked at me, a mixture of surprise and joy illuminating his face. Luna, you came! The simplicity of his reaction made me feel a wave of nostalgia. It was hard to believe we had spent so much time apart. Yes, I couldn't miss this, I replied, forcing a smile that didn't hide the insecurity I felt. The atmosphere around us seemed to vibrate, but we were in a small world apart, surrounded by unresolved memories and feelings. He hesitated before continuing. I was thinking about you last night, how you've been. The idle question made my chest tighten. I had prepared for this conversation, but now reality left me vulnerable. I've been facing some things, Rafa, but I wanted to be here for you, to celebrate your achievements. The sincerity of my response seemed to resonate in those moments, and a shadow of concern crossed his face. I understand, he said, looking down for a moment. We've all been facing our own challenges. The connection between us felt like a delicate thread, but there was something in that moment that encouraged me to continue. I feel like we need to talk about all this, about what happened between us and the family, I suggested, my heart racing at the thought of opening old wounds. He nodded slowly, as if weighing his words before speaking. Before we could delve deeper into the conversation, our parents called us over. Let's take some photos before the ceremony starts, you two. Fernanda's voice echoed through the crowd. The idea of having to hide everything we were feeling behind forced smiles bothered me. I knew this was my chance to get closer to my family, but at the same time, something told me that the truth couldn't be kept hidden forever. As we gathered with our parents, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Carlos tried to keep the mood light, joking about the graduation while Fernanda lovingly adjusted Raphael's outfit, affection I had missed. I observed how he behaved, like a cherished and wanted son. Part of me wanted the same place, but the memories of my distance were still very vivid.
After the photos, the ceremony began, and the atmosphere transformed. The words of the speaker echoed in my heart, leading me to reflect on the importance of the choices we make. While the crowd applauded and celebrated, I felt caught between two worlds, that of celebration and that of mourning everything I had left behind. Looking at Raphael, I realized he was the key to starting anew, but also to facing the ghosts that separated us. As the ceremony came to an end, everyone began to disperse, and I knew it was time to gather my courage. "Rafa, can we talk now? It's important," I asked, realizing this might be my last chance to clarify things before old patterns reestablish themselves. He hesitated for a moment, but soon agreed, his determined gaze promising that we wouldn't let unspoken words drive us apart again. Life has a strange way of putting us in front of challenges that force us to confront our fears and insecurities. It was time to face what we had left behind and perhaps rebuild the bonds that were once so strong. If you've ever been through something similar, don't hesitate to share your story. I knew Raphael's graduation would be more than just a festive event. It would be a test for me and my family. As I looked around, people were celebrating, some with tears in their eyes, others smiling from ear to ear. I was there, but I felt like a stranger amid that celebration. My parents, Carlos and Fernanda, were chatting animatedly with other relatives, their voices blending into a symphony of joy. The vibrant atmosphere contrasted sharply with the whirlwind of feelings I carried inside me. Camila, my best friend, was by my side, noticing my hesitation. "Luna, are you okay? You seem distant," she said, worried. I smiled, trying to mask the internal storm. "I'm just thinking about how everything has changed," I replied, looking at Raphael, who was surrounded by friends. He looked so happy, radiant with his accomplishments. How could I interrupt that moment? As I lost myself in thought, the ceremony began. The music echoed, and the graduates were called one by one. When Raphael finally stepped onto the stage, my heart raced. He waved to us, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. I remembered all the moments we shared, the playful banter and the fights, how we supported each other in tough times. Raphael had always been the most determined, always fighting for his dreams. Pride overflowed within me, but alongside it was a deep pain. I knew my absence had left marks, and the weight of guilt followed me like a shadow. After the ceremony, we were all invited to a party. I hesitated before entering, watching people greet each other and embrace, sharing laughter and stories. The smell of the buffet filled the air, but the party didn't entice me. Camila, sensing my discomfort, held my hand. "Let's go. You deserve this. He's your brother," she insisted. I took a deep breath, and in an act of courage, I stepped into the hall. Raphael was surrounded by friends, but when he saw me, his smile shone even brighter. He came toward me, and the rest of the world faded away. "Luna, you came!" He seemed genuinely happy to see me, and that made me feel a little more at ease. "I couldn't miss this," I replied, trying to hide the fragility I felt. Our parents approached, and the tension was palpable. Carlos looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher, a mix of relief and perhaps a bit of reproach. Fernanda seemed nervous, as if every word she was about to say was heavy. "We're so proud of Raphael," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice trembled slightly, but there was warmth in her gaze. As the conversations unfolded, I felt divided. My parents tried to be kind, but there was an invisible barrier between us. All I wanted was for them to know how much I loved them, despite the difficulties. During the party, Camila stepped away to leave me alone with my family. The moment to reconnect had arrived. "You doing okay, Luna?" Carlos asked, concerned. I wanted to say yes, but the truth was more complicated. "I'm trying to feel part of this again," I confessed, my voice almost breaking. Carlos's expression softened, and he moved a little closer. "Family will always be your home, no matter what happened." Those words touched me deeply, and I realized there might be a way back. But at the same time, I knew there were still many secrets to unveil. Fernanda interjected, looking at me with a mix of love and concern. "We missed you, Luna. I miss you," she said, tears in her eyes. That declaration was a punch to the gut. How could I explain the years of distance, the wounds that hadn't healed? Before I could find the right words, Raphael approached again, bringing with him a lightness that seemed necessary at that moment. "Let's take a picture, all together," he called, and I couldn't refuse. The idea of freezing that moment with my parents and my brother seemed important. We positioned ourselves together, and as the camera flash captured that instant, a wave of emotion washed over me. I was there, but I still didn't feel completely present. After the picture, the mood seemed to lighten, and conversations began to flow. People reminisced about Raphael's childhood stories, and I allowed myself to be carried away a bit by nostalgia. The truth was that behind Raphael's smile, there was a world of expectation and pressure I knew he felt. What I didn't know was that he also carried secrets, secrets that, sooner or later, would intertwine with mine. In a corner of the room, I thought Camilla laughing with some friends, and a thought hit me. Perhaps the key to our reconciliation lay in sharing our truths, no matter how painful they were. What truly mattered was our willingness to face the past and reconcile with the present. With that idea in mind, I felt that, after so many uncertainties, there might be a light at the end of the tunnel. I wanted our family to heal, and I was willing to fight for it. As I looked at Raphael's smile, now surrounded by lights and laughter, I knew he was the reason I was there, and that gave me strength to face what lay ahead.